3 days before he was killed, Abraham Lincoln told a small group in the White House about a dream he couldn't shake. In it, he wandered the halls of the executive mansion and heard the sound of weeping. He followed the sound until he reached the East Room, where a body lay on a raised platform, draped in funeral cloth and surrounded by mourners. He turned to a guard and asked, "Who was dead in the White House?" The guard replied, "The president. He was killed by an assassin." Lincoln reportedly said the dream had haunted him for days. His wife Mary was deeply unsettled. Lincoln tried to wave it off, saying the dead man in the dream wasn't him, it was some other fellow. But on the morning of April 14, 1865, Lincoln told his cabinet about another recurring dream, one involving a strange ship sailing toward a dark and indefinite shore. A dream he said he'd had before every major event of the Civil War. That night, he went to Ford's Theater. He never came home. 2 days before he was shot, James Garfield sat in a cabinet meeting and asked a peculiar question. He turned to his Secretary of War, Robert Lincoln, the son of Abraham Lincoln, and asked him to recount the story of his father's prophetic dream. Robert told the room about the corpse in the East Room, the mourners, the assassin. Everyone listened. No one thought much of it. 2 days later, on July 2nd, 1881, Garfield walked into the Baltimore and Potomac train station in Washington. A man named Charles Guiteau stepped up behind him and fired 2 shots into his back. What makes Garfield's story even more chilling is a letter he had written months earlier. In it, he dismissed assassination threats by writing, "Assassination can no more be guarded against than death by lightning, and it is not best to worry about either." He had no bodyguards. He believed a president should walk freely among his people. Garfield survived the shooting, but his doctors did more harm than good, probing the wound with unsterilized instruments for weeks. He died 79 days later. William McKinley didn't predict his own death, but the people around him practically begged him to avoid it. In September 1901, McKinley traveled to the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York. His personal secretary, George Cortelyou, was terrified. A wave of political assassinations had swept through Europe, and Cortelyou believed a public handshaking event at the exposition was a disaster waiting to happen. He removed the event from McKinley's schedule, twice, and twice McKinley put it back. He couldn't imagine that anyone would want to hurt him. On September 6th, McKinley stood in the Temple of Music, shaking hands with a long line of visitors. A 28-year-old anarchist named Leon Czolgosz stepped forward with a gun hidden under a bandage wrapped around his hand. He fired 2 shots into the president's abdomen. McKinley looked at the crowd and said, "Don't let them hurt him." He was talking about his own assassin. Doctors operated but couldn't find one of the bullets. An X-ray machine was on display at the very same exposition, but the doctors considered it too experimental to use. 8 days later, gangrene set in. McKinley died on September 14th, the 3rd president to be assassinated in 36 years. Before Warren Harding even won the presidency, a Washington astrologer named Madame Marcia Champney told his wife Florence that her husband would win the election, but would die a sudden and peculiar death before the end of his term. Florence was reportedly shaken, but Warren ran anyway. Once in office, the presidency crushed him. Harding was overwhelmed by the job and tormented by the corrupt friends he had appointed to power. He once said, "I knew this job would be too much for me. I am not fit for this office and should never have been here." By the summer of 1923, his health was visibly failing. He embarked on a grueling cross-country speaking tour, but during a speech in Seattle, he slurred his words, dropped his manuscript, and nearly collapsed at the podium. His aides blamed food poisoning from tainted crab meat, but his personal physician knew the truth. Harding's heart was giving out. On August 2nd, 1923, in a hotel room in San Francisco, his wife Florence was reading him a magazine article. He said, "That's good. Go on." Then he shuddered and died. Florence refused to allow an autopsy. To this day, no one knows the exact cause of his death. Franklin Roosevelt didn't just sense that his time was limited. He planned for it. In December 1937, while still in his second term, Roosevelt sat down and wrote a 4-page document with detailed instructions for his own funeral and burial. He specified the exact spot in his family's rose garden at Hyde Park, New York, where he wanted to be buried. He designed his own grave marker, a plain white marble block, 8 feet long and 4 feet wide, with no carvings and no decoration. Just his name and the years of his birth and death. He donated his entire estate to the American people. He built the nation's first presidential library on the grounds. By his 4th term, Roosevelt's health had deteriorated dramatically. He was gaunt, exhausted, and visibly aging far beyond his years. On April 12, 1945, while sitting for a portrait at his retreat in Warm Springs, Georgia, he said, "I have a terrific headache." He slumped forward and never regained consciousness. He was buried exactly where he asked to be, beside the sundial in the Rose Garden. On the morning of November 22, 1963, John F. Kennedy woke up in a Fort Worth hotel room. His aide brought him a copy of the Dallas Morning News, which contained a full-page advertisement attacking him. Kennedy read every word. He turned to his wife Jackie and said, "We're heading into nut country today." Then he paused and added, "You know, last night would have been a hell of a night to assassinate a president." Hours later, Kennedy's motorcade rolled through the streets of Dallas. At 12:30 in the afternoon, shots rang out from the Texas School Book Depository. Kennedy was struck twice. He was pronounced dead at Parkland Memorial Hospital at 1 o'clock. He was 46 years old. 6 presidents, 6 moments where the end was sensed, warned, dreamed, or joked about before it arrived. Whether it was a dream in the White House, a letter dismissing danger, or a dark joke on the morning of a motorcade, each of these men brushed against the shadow of their own fate and walked straight into it anyway.